of people and the planet, their Alternate Future Challenge Award, they award $1 million annually to 10 university startups that work alongside their team of successful founders for 1 year, turning their ideas from ideas into world-changing companies. They provide additional financing through their early stage fund and network of venture capital partners. So David Morgan Thaler founded the firm Morgan Thaler Ventures in 1968, at the time when very few venture capital firms existed. Over 48 years, Morgan Thaler Ventures has raised $4 billion of venture capital and funded more than 325 startup companies. And these companies have been in the information technology fields, life science, and industrial technology. And just to name a few, they include Apple, Verifone, Nuance, and Evernote.
We also want to thank everyone on the MIT 100K organizing committee. Our team members invested countless hours. You see us three up here, but none of this is possible without any of the team behind us. Also, we want to recognize our video and audio production teams at MIT. Everything from hearing me to seeing me to touching me, oh no, don't do that, is done by the MIT video and audio production teams. Finally, I want to thank Sloan Student Life Office, who assisted us in organizing the event, and the CAC, who is hosting us here at the Kresge Auditorium. We want to extend a special thank you to the whole team at the Martin Trust Center especially. And finally, I want to thank our over 300 judges and mentors who've had this year. Thank you for offering your domain experience, mentorship, and most of all, your time, without which our competition and our finalists would not be where we are today. We are truly grateful to have such a dedicated and selfless group of supporters amongst the scientific, entrepreneurship, and VC community. Thank you to everyone who supported the 100K.
And now for And now to our live judges. We're deeply grateful for their presence this evening, and we wanted to thank each judge for giving up their time tonight. Our judges are distinguished members of the Boston startup ecosystem, and I wanted to give a short introduction for each judge. First, we have Carl Sun, who is the co-founder and board chair at Lucid Software, the leading provider of visual collaboration solutions, and served as founding CEO for 12 years. Prior to Lucid, Carl held several leadership roles at Google, including starting Google's patent department and setting IP strategy, starting Google China's office and leading business development for the Greater China region, and leading Google's investments in advanced wind and battery technologies. Carl holds a SBSM in Core 6 and an SM in Technology and Policy from MIT and a JD from Harvard Law School, where he was editor of the Harvard Law Review. He was also honored as a 2017 EY Entrepreneur of the Year. Next, we have Irina Pereira, who is the CEO and founder of Unleashed, a cutting-edge technology firm that is redefining the boundaries of digital innovation. With an impressive background in technology and strategic development, Irina founded Unleashed to harness the potential of emerging technologies in empowering businesses and enhancing consumer experiences. Under her leadership, Unleashed has achieved remarkable growth, becoming a leader in its field. Irina's leadership style, marked with a focus on creativity, inclusivity, and sustainability, continues to inspire a new generation of entrepreneurs. Next, we have Jamie Goldstein, who is the founding partner at Pillar VC. Jamie founded the firm with the ambition to build the next generation of lasting companies in Boston, and he has spent over 2 decades working in venture capital. His investments include Algorand, Path AI, Abridge, and Jellyfish, among others. Prior to Pillar, Jamie was an investing partner for 18 years at Northbridge Venture Partners. We also have Jules Puri, a founder, CEO, and investing partner at X Factor Ventures, an author and a board member. Jules serves on the boards of the University of Michigan Alumni Association and the Access to Markets Initiative of the American Economic Liberties Project. She's the author of How We Make Stuff Now, named one of the 11 must-read books for entrepreneurs by Inc. magazine. Jules is co-founder and former CEO of the product launch platform, The Grommet. Jules started her career as an industrial designer for technology companies and was subsequently a senior executive for large brands such as Keds, StrideRite, and PlaySchool. The Grommet is her third startup, following roles as VP at Design Continuum and president of Ziggs.com. Jules was named one of Fortune's most powerful women entrepreneurs in 2013.
We also want to thank Richard Delude, who is a co-founder and partner of _VC. As a programmer turned entrepreneur turned venture capitalist, Richard started his career as a quant at Goldman Sachs and then built out a skunkworks team that launched the D2C e-commerce business at Procter & Gamble. From there, he started his own machine learning startup to mine insights from social media for brands and spent the earlier part of his venture career at Founder Collective before co-founding _Venture Capital. If he's not programming or pushing from idea to IPO, Richard is probably out keeping balance on the slope. An accomplished skier, to say the least, he is a former member of the United States ski team and an alternate to the US Olympic team in Torino. And last, but definitely not least, we have Paul English, who is the founder of Boston Venture Studio. Paul has previously co-founded and successfully sold 6 startups: Kayak, Lola, Moonbeam, GetHuman, Boston Light, and Intermute. It's quite a list. Paul is also the founder of 4 nonprofits: Summits Education in Haiti, Embrace Boston, the Winter Walk for Homelessness, and the Bipolar Social Club. Paul is the subject of Tracy Kidder's book, A Truck Full of Money. You can hear an interview with Paul on How I Built This with Guy Raz, and you can see his video from TEDx Boston in 2022. Let's give it up for the amazing judges that we have today. Thank you very much for sitting through the intros. To all our competitors tonight, we wish you all the best. It's been an extremely exciting journey, and we cannot wait to see these ventures blossom. Before we get started, let's give a round of applause to all the teams that participate in the competition this year. We're excited to be part of your journey. Tonight's first team will be PolicyMind.
Good evening. We're PolicyMind. We're using AI to build better policies and revolutionizing the policymaking process. Poorly designed policies affect all of us. In fact, they cost American families alone $500 billion a year. Let's take homelessness, for example. Homelessness has been increasing despite a growth in spending. Yet veteran homelessness has decreased or been eradicated in 83 cities across 3 states. The question is not how they did it, but how this very focalized policy can be extended to other subgroups. The problem that PolicyMind is addressing is why effective policies like this one are not easily available to all policymakers in the United States and the world. Let me tell you about the policymaking process. Meet Donna. She's real. She's a policymaker in the greater Boston area and in charge of drafting a homelessness intervention policy in the next 6 months. This is what the policymaking process looks like for Donna today. Her resources are fragmented and scattered and sometimes unavailable, requiring expensive consultants and an extensive timeline. This results in poorly designed policies that are not citizen-driven and that have absolutely no impact. PolicyMind will streamline the process for her, systematizing the world's collective policy intelligence and the government's local proprietary data, while making citizen input available across the whole policy cycle. This will dramatically decrease the money and time spent in policymaking, resulting in evidence-based, citizen-centric policies that have been modeled for the effectiveness in her communities. Let us show you how we're going to do this. PolicyMind will make policymaking 60 times faster, 75% cheaper, and with higher quality policies, we will also reduce the waste in public resources. We're going to show you our model.
So I'm excited to show you the demo of our functional product that has been built by using real-world policy data, a large language model, and an agent-based simulation for developing homelessness policies. So to start with the new policy, Donna signs into PolicyMind and asks about the size and nature of homelessness in Boston. PolicyMind gives her very detailed stats about the problem and also visualizes data for her better understanding. Next, Donna asks PolicyMind to share examples of successful policies from cities that are similar to Boston. PolicyMind tells her about 4 other cities. She compares their policies and is really amazed by Detroit's approach. So she tells PolicyMind to create a new policy for the city of Boston, but based on Detroit's policy. For that, PolicyMind generates 4 very specific recommendations for Boston and compares their impact and performance. But Donna wants to be more confident, so she uses the agent-based simulation to model the policy impact. Lastly, she also deploys PolicyMind's public-facing chatbot to gather real-time citizen feedback on the policy. And this is the prototype that we are also taking to our initial pilots.
Our beachhead market are cities and towns in New England and Massachusetts. We will then expand nationally and then globally. In our second phase, we will build a platform and monetize our proprietary data. With the 100K, we will finish our pilot phase, which will allow us to confirm our product and customer requirements. And then we will seek investments and then expand from there. These are our current partners. We have active pilots in the town of Concord, Massachusetts, and the city of Riverside, California. And also, these are the people that believe in us. My name is Andrea, and this is the team. We're in the intersection of technology, policy, and business. Rami is the chief AI engineer at Bing. We are proven founders of 7 successful ventures that currently employ 2,000 people. And we have 20 years of experience doing policy, working for government, and selling for government. We also have passion, energy, and we're very good friends. We first thought of this in 2017, but it wasn't possible until the recent breakthroughs in AI. It is incredible to be standing here tonight with the right team, with the right technology, and at the right time. Join us in empowering policymakers across the world.
Now the rest of the team will join for questions from the judges.
Can I go? Does this work? Perfect. Nice job, Andrea. It's a good pitch. First question would be, as you guys think about the underlying data and the integrity of it, maybe you could talk a little bit about that, especially if you're making decisions based on facts. How do you prevent for hallucinations or not having the appropriate data in the system?
Okay. So we are going to have guardrails in our model, and that will be threefold. The first one is the local data that we are going to get from the government, which is proprietary. That local data is very rich and granular and is very comprehensive. That prevents the initial biases and hallucinations. The second one is going to be the simulation and evaluation layer, which is going to make the policymakers aware of the early hallucinations or biases, even if they come after analyzing the local data. And finally, third one, in the initial phase, we are going to have a set of experts that evaluate and annotate the output that is going to come out of the model so that the policymakers do not have to deal with those biases at a later stage.
Thank you.
Great job, guys. Does your model help the user understand whether a policy is likely to be approved?
Yeah, so one of the exciting things about PolicyMind is that it's actually going to be able to integrate citizen impacts and feedback throughout the policy lifecycle. So it's really the first time that a policymaker will have a policy sandbox available to them. And so PolicyMind will be integrating sentiments from media or citizens historically, and that will be integrated into the grading and the effectiveness that PolicyMind will be feeding back to the policymaker to consider.
Thank you for that presentation. I think we all want more effective policy. I noticed that your slide talked about some of the savings, saving a lot of time, providing these resources. What is your take on, part of the policy process is the process itself and the public feeling that they're included. I think the slide said, cutting it down to 15 hours or 15 days from 200 to 300 days, but that by definition means you're maybe short-circuiting the process. How do you think about those process kinds of issues and inclusion?
So really, it's about the timeline to actually create that draft policy and that initial policy to put forward. And so when we talk to users and policymakers, there's a long timeline in being able to really process the data, absorb that data, and the consultants that are required to develop that policy really add a lot of time and cost into that process. And so PolicyMind is taking just a lot of what the consultants do out of the process, right? So it's processing the information and providing that initial policy architecture to consider early on. And so that really shortens the timeline for the policy that's then put forward to be able to be engaged and go through the process. And we expect the process for improvement to be much more efficient because the policy is fact-based, evidence-based, and also modeled for their constituents.
I'd like to continue on that question, though, the thought around engaging citizens. And there are two things I'm thinking about. One is that shorter time, as Carl pointed out, makes it a little harder for people to participate. It's a good and a bad, right? It's mostly good, but there's a bad potential underside to that. The other side I'm interested in is how do you get at people who are typically hard to get at? Typically today in policy processes, people who have time, tends to be retired people. People who are least affected by some of the policies have the biggest voices on new policies because busy younger people aren't aware of what's happening around them or aren't participating. So the first one's about time. How do you get people? Second is how do you, if you can, uncover the people who need to be heard and are hard to find?
So I think the citizen engagement tool that's integrated into the policy process is going to be able to have outreach that's really targeted to the policy and be able to reach out to constituents, right, based on mailing lists. So they'll be able to target particular populations in their town that maybe they couldn't prior, and do that throughout the policy development process to be able to get feedback on what they're crafting.
I'd like to ask a question about depth versus breadth. So you talked about homelessness as an example. I think that's a really important problem to be working on. Let's say a year from now, how many problems do you want to have your platform have helped solve? Like on the one hand, you could say, maybe you should go really deep with homelessness and just like crush that and show you can make improvements across different sized cities across the country, and then flaunt that ability for impact to then go to other verticals. Another way of thinking about this is, no, you should find like 5 or 10. And I want to know what your thoughts are. Like a year from now, how many problems do you hope to have had good solutions for?
So the pilot phase is really what we're looking forward to be able to work with municipalities. Right now we have 2. We'd like to get to 10 this year. And working with them is identifying what are their priorities for policies. And so we'd love to understand what their top 5 are in this initial pilot phase. And that will really develop where we go with our early adopters and what policies we're focused on in that next beachhead step.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Next up, we have Helix Carbon.
Evening. Dioxide into valuable chemicals. So basically, in every emissions scenario we look at, we need and the approaches that we have to doing that today, things like direct air capture and CCS, don't create inherent economic benefit at the end of it, and so they're really challenging to scale. And at the same time, we've built a based economy where that carbon atom is fossil. So for everything, can we these two trends? Can we take the carbon dioxide that we're emitting and use Thanks. The reason for that is it's too expensive. You know, if we look at the simplest carbon-based chemical, carbon monoxide, it costs around $600 a ton. It's a $60 billion fossil fuel-based business. And there is a technology, electrolysis, that allows us to use electricity to directly convert CO2 to syngas, but it's too expensive. It costs $800 to $1,000 a ton to do that conversion, so it hasn't been commercialized. And the reason for that high cost is today's systems use expensive precious metal catalysts, things like platinum and iridium, They are relatively inefficient, so they cost a lot to operate, and they produce often a pretty impure product. And so you need to go through this costly secondary purification. That means, again, it's too expensive to commercialize. But what we've done is solved all three of these problems and been able to bring that levelized cost down to $350 a ton. So we're actually able to compete directly with fossil fuel-based syngas. This is the system that we use to do this. It's kind of, you can think of it kind of like a battery or a fuel cell, but run in reverse. So instead of putting in fuel and getting out electricity, we put in carbon dioxide and electricity, and we get out the fuel that we want. This form factor isn't what's novel. What's novel is the catalyst system that sits in the middle. You know, it's a series of innovations that we've developed in the chemical engineering department here at MIT that dramatically improve the economics of this system. And this isn't just a pretty CAD model. You know, we've actually started building these systems, and with these, we've been able to demonstrate a pretty dramatic improvement in the performance. You know, this system shows about a 30% improvement in energy efficiency, which is the biggest piece of our OpEx. We also see a 25% lower cost to actually build it, because again, we're phasing out those precious metal catalysts. And we do all of that while achieving 90% product purity, meaning we don't need costly secondary purification. So basically what all this means is we've built the first electrolyzer that allows us to produce syngas and directly compete with fossil-based chemicals. So we're taking this to market by building a drop-in and self-contained carbon-to-fuel conversion system that circularizes the industrial cycle, the carbon cycle at industrial facilities. So we pull in the CO2 emissions from an industrial emitter, convert that to the fuels that they need on site, and then sell that back to them to power their industrial processes. They, of course, get that carbon emissions reduction, but they also get insulation from what's been an incredibly volatile natural gas market, and they get the operational benefits of on-site supply chain and feedstock production. We get to capture that margin between our cost to produce, $350 a ton, and the current market price for syngas at $600 a ton. And you know, I want to emphasize, these don't include a carbon credit or any kind of cost sharing, and so we actually think over time we can improve on these numbers. Like I said, we're starting with syngas, targeting methanol production facilities in the southeast US as our beachhead because they need syngas as a chemical feedstock. There's not really another way for them to decarbonize. But from there, our catalyst system can be diversified to a broader suite of carbon-based chemicals, and we're focusing particularly on ethylene. And you know, everything on this screen is, it's not just a $300 billion market opportunity. This represents over 600 million tons of annual CO2 emissions, so it's a climate opportunity as well. And we have the team to make this happen. I have over 6 years of experience developing the catalyst for these kinds of chemical transformations and actually commercializing energy technologies. David Brown is a chemical engineer by training with over 10 years in complex logistics operations. And Dr. Ariel First is the co-inventor of our technology and an expert in electrochemical transformations and electrocatalysis. So if this is a vision that you share, I just want to invite you to join us in closing the carbon cycle. Thank you.
And now the rest of the team joins for questions from the judges.
Could you talk a little bit more about those 6 years, how you got to here? Like, where did you do that and your background?
Yeah, so I did my undergraduate in chemistry, and so my first work was researching basically these exact same kinds of catalysts, but for converting nitrogen to ammonia. So I'd have a series of work around that, and then I went and worked with the Biden administration on policy and technology commercialization at the Boston Consulting Group. So I worked with them on developing the policies around this kind of energy technology. And then here, my specialty is in electrochemistry. So I'm in the mechanical engineering department, and that's a lot of my research here is electrochemistry and electrochemical sensing.
How volatile is the price of syngas?
It's basically entirely tied to natural gas prices, which have varied about 5x over the past 5 years, and even more in Europe, actually. So about 80% of the cost of syngas is just directly tied to feedstock, so quite volatile. Yeah, $600 is kind of like a conservative number. It's actually been quite a bit above that, depending on where you are in the world and what day you're looking at the market. But yeah.
Could you speak a little bit to the first couple of customers in syngas? Like, what would your first 3 customers in syngas look like or have common denominator profile?
So we are starting with a pilot unit, and a pilot unit is going to be at likely a pyrolysis facility somewhere nearby. I believe it's in Chelsea, and that customer doesn't necessarily buy the syngas from us initially. But our first 3 customers who are going to circularize their plant, we're looking in the methanol space. These customers must have syngas in order to create their methanol, and we see them as in the Gulf Coast region producing at least 1 million tons of methanol per year.
You presented a very attractive business model where you get paid on the gap. I assume that means you have to fund the CapEx. How much is that for a typical project?
So for an electrolyzer, our first commercial unit, we're expecting to be about 50 tons for the for the commercial unit, and that we think is going to be on the order of about 17 million, with a payback period of about 4 years. It's worth about 4.3 million per year.
Thank you.
You mentioned a pilot unit. What is the scale of that? And then what are the main challenges for scaling up, assuming that is successful?
Yeah, the pilot unit is going to produce around 500 kilograms a day. So the 50-ton a day unit, the commercial unit, that's 50 tons a day. The pilot's going to be about half a ton a day. And the main challenges there are just getting technically speaking, getting our current density up. So there's sort of 3 levers we can pull to do that. We can increase the amount of catalyst we're putting on the electrode. We can use different types of electrode, essentially plates that we're actually already testing. And so we think that's a pretty tractable challenge, but that's sort of a series of engineering iterations that we just need to go through. And the other big one is contaminants. So understanding what kinds of contaminants in the flue stream that's coming from these customers can foul our systems, and how do we deal with that? So we have a couple ways of managing that, but those are the 2 biggest challenges. Yeah.
And I will say to this and the last question, we are not reinventing the wheel in terms of the form factor of our electrolyzer. So there's a lot less system engineering than with a conventional electrolyzer startup, which gives us a huge advantage because we can use off-the-shelf components and integrate our electrodes with existing systems. So that's going to allow us to scale and create enough daisy chain systems for these pilot plants very, very quickly without having to do a lot of upfront engineering or spend a lot of CapEx.
You're amazing. Thank you, Helix Carbon. Thank you very much. Next up, we have Crimson Scientific.
I started talking about that.
If your heart is beating in your chest, pay attention, because this pitch is for you. My name's Michael Chetta. I've been practicing emergency medicine for 25 years. Mark and I started Crimson Scientific because we want to reimagine the electrocardiogram. I want to start by telling you a quick story about my father-in-law. He was visiting me many years ago. I had just gotten off an overnight shift in the ER, and I came home. We were talking in the kitchen. I can tell he didn't look well. He was sweaty and pale. I immediately put him in my car, took him back to the ER. And the first thing I did was an electrocardiogram, or an EKG. And it was immediately apparent to me his condition was grave. This was the crucial first clue that something was wrong. He went into cardiac arrest just a few minutes later. He flatlined. We started CPR, we gave him epinephrine, and we got his heartbeat back. We saved his life that day, and the EKG was the first clue. Robert went on to live 15 more years. He saw his grandchildren, my kids, graduate from college. And the EKG was the first clue that something was wrong. You may not know much about EKGs, but they are the most commonly used diagnostic tool to evaluate cardiovascular disease in the world, used over 1 million times a day. But the technology's not evolved in over 70 years. I'm going to tell you what that means. So this is the process we use in 2024 when we do an electrocardiogram. We palpate the ribs to try to identify where the electrodes belong. Sometimes we need to shave the chest, apply glue. Then we take these stickers, put them on the patient's body. We take this bundle of wires, untangle them, and finally can attach them to the patient, hopefully in the correct orientation. We get it wrong all the time. This is what I live with every day. Unfortunately, the problem is slow. The problem is it's slow, it's error-prone, and it takes a trained healthcare provider in order to do it well. The impact is significant. Ample research shows that the longer it takes for someone having a heart attack to get definitive treatment, the higher the mortality and the higher the healthcare cost. Furthermore, access is limited. Of the 15,000 skilled nursing facilities in this country, very few of them have on-site EKG capabilities because of these limitations. That only adds to the problems around hospital readmissions and rising healthcare costs as well. So our solution is simple. It's a patent-pending technology. It's a weighted cardiac pad that's embedded with an array of dry electrodes. It simply lays on the patient's chest. Electrode placement is automatically determined using signal processing and machine learning, which virtually eliminates the errors associated with manual lead placement. Excuse me. There's no adhesives, no wires, automatic lead detection. The result is then transferred wirelessly to a mobile device where the result can be analyzed, archived, and distributed. Our product is low cost, reusable, because our goal is to minimize the financial burden on hospitals and deliver on value. The output is a standard 12-lead EKG. We're not asking doctors to do anything different. What we are doing is providing a more efficient way to capture an EKG, as Mark is demonstrating, simply placing the pad on the patient's chest. It's faster, virtually eliminates errors, and largely autonomous. This will reduce mortality and cost and open up significant markets in the skilled nursing, post-acute, and remote access locations that currently don't have access to electrocardiograms, where healthcare providers are in short supply. The total available market national and worldwide is over $3.7 billion. Our initial beachhead is going to be the skilled nursing assisted living environment, and if we can capture 40% of that, we think our total SOM will be over $100 million per year. Competition is significant in the world of arrhythmia detection. You're all familiar with the Cardia device or your Apple Watch that can pick up arrhythmias such as atrial fibrillation. These are not a replacement for a 12-lead EKG. They cannot detect a heart attack. We're going after autonomous 12-lead detection. Our traction is significant. We've done an enormous amount of market validation. We have confirmation from several of the largest healthcare systems in the country that are ready to acquire a product, and several that want to pilot it as well. We have an esteemed team of advisors helping us on the technology hurdles. On the medical device front, we have advisors who have exited medical device companies in the past. And the regulatory front, advisors who have worked at the FDA and are QMS professionals. Perhaps the best part for me is our team. As I mentioned, I'm an emergency physician, been practicing for 25 years, and I studied engineering as an undergrad, so this is kind of embedded in me. But I was also a senior executive with one of the largest multi-specialty practices in the country before I left to do this. Mark is a graduate student here at MIT. He has a history of AI research and software engineering, and he worked for Boston Scientific doing medical devices. And we're also accompanied by a team of exceptionally talented engineers from MIT and Duke, with Kevin Jaguars Region on the team. You know, the device we're making will have an impact on everybody in this room one day. So I encourage you to join us on our mission to impact the lives of millions of people suffering from cardiac disease. Thank you.
Now for questions from the judges.
Great job. Have you made one?
No. We've done a small prototype that's able to pick up 4 leads on dry electrode leads, but we don't have an active product that we can demonstrate. We're well underway with the technology, though. We're confident we'll get there within the next 2 months.
And the reason you don't have that yet is just the timing. You just got started. Is that right?
Timing. Yeah. Are you suggesting technological hurdles as the other barrier? Well, I'll let Mark cover that.
Yeah, hello? There we go. Yeah, so first of all, we've started in February, but the technology has been de-risked in other applications. So there's 2 parts of the technology. There's one using dry electrodes to capture the electrical signal, and 2 is being able to reconstruct the 12-lead EKG from the 60-lead system. Both have been de-risked in applications such as brainwave capture. So we're just applying it in different applications, and that's what our patent is around.
I have so many questions, but I'll ask 2. One, how did you guys find each other is my first question.
It's a great story.
Can you give us a short version?
Yeah, short version. So I just walked into a class called Healthcare Ventures. I wasn't even signed up for it. And then Mike pitched this idea, and then I walked up to him after class, never showed up to class again, and then we've been working on it since.
Second question is, what would 100K get you to? What would be your accomplishments?
Yeah, there's a couple parts to that. One is the actual product development, so electronics, and then the second part would be the clinical validation, so setting up an IRB just to make sure that we're able to replicate 12-lead EKG capture to the standard technology, and then we'll use the rest of it for the actual FDA regulatory part, which is a much larger clinical trial. But it is fast because there's a precedented device already, the normal traditional 12-lead EKG. It's just a 510K submission, and it should not take longer than a year, and we've gotten confirmation on that from several people.
Do you have to have individual devices for various body sizes and variability?
Yeah, so our current design is various sizes. So our goal, obviously, is to make it available for everybody. We think we can do that with three sizes, so small, medium, large. And then, yeah, that's the idea for now. We might also make it flexible so that you can expand it.
And for children?
And for, yes, so it would be for children, pediatric version, and then adult version, and then small, medium, large for each of them.
Have you considered a consumable part?
Sorry?
Have you considered a consumable part?
Disposable?
So it's not just sell it once and you're done.
Well, our intent is to provide it as kind of a lease arrangement where we would lease it to a hospital, say for $200 or $300 a month, and there'd be maybe a per-use fee associated on top of that, which would keep the upfront capital expense to a minimum, allow low barrier to entry, because that is part of the concern with skilled nursing facilities, ambulatory centers, urgent cares and such. Investing in a traditional EKG is as much as $15,000 to $20,000.
And this technology is very cheap. Electrodes are very cheap. So if you can offer it to a hospital for even free, and then say every month, we'll lease it to you for a couple $100, prove that it's worth their time and it's minimizing their cost, then you can get revenue on a monthly basis.
I think your ultimate goal is probably just to replace all existing EKG, but in terms of entering the market, do you feel you want to go into hospitals and replace those, or go into the ambulatory centers or nursing?
Yeah. I feel strongly about this. Our beachhead, there's really 5 primary markets: ambulatory care, primary care doctors, cardiologists, urgent care. Second would be emergency, EMS, fire rescue. Third would be acute care, which you're talking about, hospitals, ICUs. Fourth would be post-acute. And this is our beachhead, post-acute. That's skilled nursing, assisted living, home health, mobile diagnostics. And the reason we think that's the most appealing is, A, there's almost no competition. As I mentioned during my talk, skilled nursing facilities, for the most part, do not have on-site EKG capabilities because of the cost and the technical challenges. So minimal competition. Furthermore, the value proposition is overwhelming. Majority of patients in skilled nursing are facilities paid on a bundled payment, a flat payment, regardless of the cost that day. If a patient requires medications and services, that comes out of that flat payment. Right now, a skilled nursing facility, if they need an EKG, they call an outside company to come in and do it. That costs $800 per EKG. Or they put the patient in an ambulance and send them to the hospital, $1,500 per occurrence. That comes out of their bundled payment. If we can give them an inexpensive way to do it on site, the opportunity, the value return is significant.
Maybe one final question would be, since starting the company, what has changed most in your vision?
What has changed in my vision?
Yes.
Since I started, okay. So as I mentioned earlier, that you may have heard, I was an executive VP with a very large healthcare company, multi-specialty practice. Been there for a long time. I helped found the company back in 2015. For all intents and purposes, it was going to be my legacy. I would have retired there. And I met Mark, and I decided that this was more exciting to me, to really be an entrepreneur and get off the ground and work with this guy. And I left USACS at the end of December. So that's a big change. If that answers your question. Regarding,
I think, vision-wise, though, you step into a product, thinking about one market that you want to go after. And a very logical one here is hospitals. You want to replace it in emergency departments. But the more and more we talk to people, I think the innovative part of this is also the business model, which is going after the post-acute. You talk to some of the people that run these post-acute facilities, it's incredibly sad. I mean, you have one nurse for 30 patients. One nurse for 30 patients. So if you can make it faster, make it cheap, and reduce the cost, well, everybody's winning here, right? The skilled nursing facility is making more money, and the patients are getting better care. They're spending less time in the ERs because every time they need one of these, they just go back to the ER, which is just not a very pleasant thing to find out, and that was a surprise to me. So I think stepping into it, I was excited about a startup, but the more I really develop this thing, it's an actual, there's a huge impact.
Thank you.
Thank you, Crimson Scientific. Take all of it. You got to take all of it, guys. And next up, we have Adalat AI. Good job, good job.
Hi, everyone. We are Adalat AI, and we stand on the premise that the judicial process should be a pathway to justice and not a punishment in itself. Yet for countless Indians, that quest for justice is excruciatingly slow and effectively denied. I saw this firsthand as a lawyer in courts where I've been practicing for over a decade in India. I saw this from a judge's perspective when I was a law clerk with the Supreme Court Justice. And more recently, I saw this from a client's perspective when my partner and I petitioned the Indian Supreme Court trying to legalize same-sex marriage. And from each of these vantage points, you realize that as judges and lawyers at the front end of the legal system, you can only do so much when its back end is completely broken. Imagine a system so bogged down that on average, it takes 13.5 years for a case to be cleared by the entire system. At our current rate, studies show that it's going to take us 300 years to clear this backlog. And this is creating a human rights crisis, because 75% of the prisoners in jails in India today are not convicts serving their sentences, but under trials, languishing and waiting for their court dates. And as in any broken justice systems, this disproportionately affects the poorest and most vulnerable populations of society. That due process itself has become the punishment. Now, this is a complex, multidimensional problem with various facets, but one big binding constraint is the acute shortage of skilled stenographers. You see, in a courtroom, nearly every word has to be written down meticulously, from oral arguments, cross-examinations, to the final judgments and orders, and judges depend on stenographers who in most big cities are slow and untrained and overloaded, and outside the big cities, they don't exist. So judges painstakingly write everything by hand, even today, which not only slows down the process, but compromises on their ability to do justice. And justice deserves better. Enter Adalat AI, a legal tech startup that's building AI solutions for court systems to end judicial delays and improve access to justice. And our flagship product is a speech-to-text transcription software designed for the law to address that exact problem. We've trained our algorithms and models on extensive legal data so that it understands all that complex, Latin, sophisticated legal jargon we love showing off with. It's also built in partnerships with judges and stenographers so that it's actually usable in the courtrooms. And it's built on AI, which means as a co-pilot to the judge or the stenographer, with every edit or every correction, it's learning and improving on a daily basis. It's also catered for the Indian court scenario and is providing services in 22 Indian languages. This is critical because very often a witness comes to court and deposes in their vernacular. A judge hears what they're saying, translates it, and then transcribes it in English, and everyone gets into disagreements on what the right transcription should be. We've taken what takes into minutes, automated it, and put it down to seconds so that in real time, it's captured in our systems, ensuring nothing gets lost in either translation or transcription, and our work is already showing numbers and impact. Our pilot courts in India that use our technology are able to cut down court resolution times by almost 30 to 50%, depending on the case type on case stage. And we've partnered with 5 Indian states. We are live in Indian courts today that are using our products to automate and expedite this critical pain point in the system. But what you can do in India, you should be able to do in the entire world because, thank you, colonialism, the same legal system exists in many other countries around the world with the same legal lingo and legal jargon so that we can be a global solution for the global south. And we're talking to Nigeria, Bangladesh, and Kenya about this. There's a great opportunity in India because tech and public administration is exploding. We built the national payment system and biometric system, and now there are budgetary allocations to automate and digitize court systems, especially after the pandemic. And you can cross-subsidize this work by selling this to law firms who are also in desperately needing these solutions so that you have a sustainable path to impact. We have an excellent team. I studied law at Harvard Law School, economics, development economics at Harvard, Oxford, and MIT. I worked at BCG, the World Bank, Courts and Governments. Our CTO is a triple IT engineer with extensive AI and ML experience across Indian startups, and we're bringing this interdisciplinary experience to solve this multidimensional problem, along with the support of multiple accelerators, government partners, court partners, and Microsoft as an incubator. When I was in court, the glamorous thing would be to get that one bail in one courtroom or that one civil rights case in another courtroom. But that felt so individualistic. Now we're on the cusp of unleashing hundreds of thousands of bails and civil rights cases by simply converting words into justice, and we hope you'll join us. Thank you.
Is this working? Oh,
yes.
There. Great job with the storytelling. I particularly appreciated the stat about 300 years to clear the backlog. It's always a win for me if there's a stat I can't forget and I have to go home and tell my family. Like, I'll tell that one. My question is, you mentioned pilots, you talked about a lot of financial support. It sounds like you've been at this a while, or give me a sense of where the business is or your journey in the business.
We haven't been at this for a while, to be honest. We started this last year, but the reason I think we've gained a lot of traction is because I'm an insider. I'm not someone who's parachuted into the legal system and has to build fresh relationships. So I think it's been in the making for almost a decade because I've been experiencing this. But building the product and taking it to courts has been much faster. I know the pain points, I know the justices, I have that network that I can go and partner with them, and I also have that credibility. I'm not a clever solution looking for a problem to solve, but I can actually collaborate and partner with them. And as a result, we're actually an organization of 7 people, including front-end, back-end, and ML engineers that are building this, and I'm actually quite proud of the progress we've made over the last year.
So digitizing is phase 1. Once you have all this digitized, what are you going to do with it? Like, what's phase 2, phase 3? What are the next steps?
So as I said, this is a multi-dimensional problem, and we want to be a company that builds a portfolio of AI and tech solutions to automate different parts of the life cycle of a case. So first, we want to get the speech-to-text transcription absolutely right, which I think will take some time, particularly with the linguistic diversity in India, because each region has its own language and dialect and diction, which needs to be captured in the model. So this will take some time. But once we've nailed this, the plan is to automate other parts. So for example, calendaring is a big problem in courts. What dates do you give on the next date of hearing? And very often, a rich, expensive lawyer will come and bully their weight and get priority, whereas the other cases will just get neglected. And we should be able to make this more objective and predict for the courts using large language models and predictive analytics on what the next date of hearing should be. How do you prioritize different parts of a case? The other solution we're talking to courts about is a CRM stakeholder management system, because that court master that's responsible for all the logistics of a courtroom uses a pen and paper today to align on the schedules and calendars of the witnesses, the victims, the lawyers, the judges, the police officers, the forensic laboratories. The list is endless, and this is all done manually. You can build powerful systems that automate these solutions for the court so that it can actually expedite these holdups and pain points. And the vision is, over a period of 10 years, maybe become redundant so that the court actually adopts all our systems like the government did for the payment system of a biometric system. And our redundancy means that we've made a big dent on the problem.
The numbers you showed earlier on the slide about the market, were those global numbers, or were those just India-specific?
Those are just India-specific numbers, because as I said, there's a huge movement for technology in public administration, and a lot of these solutions are hard to build inside government, so they're being built by the leading tech experts outside government, and I gave examples of the biometric ID system or the national payment system, and were then onboarded into the government, and the exact same thing is happening with courts. The pandemic made us realize how important it is to have virtual courts. Huge budgetary allocations were made, and those are all numbers for the Indian market. And as I said, this is not just limited to the public sector. We want to cross-subsidize our social impact work by selling this to law firms who need this, the in-house legal teams of large corporations, so that you can also tap into the private sector legal market and cross-subsidize impact with the sustainable pathway.
A quick follow-up question there. So you mentioned that you're an insider, and that's how you've helped to get there. In terms of the go-to-market, are these kinds of decisions made jurisdiction by jurisdiction at the court level, or is there some top-down hierarchy from the government that says we're going to roll this out, or how do you think about that adoption?
Right, that's a great question. So jurisdictional separation of powers and independence of judiciary is not just on substantive issues, but also on administrative issues. So courts actually administer themselves all their technology adoptions, which means that we actually work with the high court of each state. Think of it as the equivalent of a federal circuit court that oversees, say, district courts in each state, or the equivalent of a state government in each state that's responsible for district courts. And that's why we have to go state high court by state high court, because one, we have to customize it to the district courts and the jurisdiction of the courts under them, but also, as I said, because of the vernacular diversity, we have to also customize models to the linguistic needs of each state.
Thank you very much, Adalat AI. Next up, we have Max Compute Co.
All right, hey everybody, we are Max Compute Co, and we are building middleware for developers who use LLMs. Now, while we're building for the enterprise, I'm sure this will be resonant with many of you in the audience who are founders, because we've spoken to many of you. Building on top of LLMs is really hard. For one, they're not very reliable. Whether it's Anthropic or OpenAI, the APIs go down multiple times a day, and that's really not acceptable in building user products. They're also really costly. The more customers you have that use these tools, the bigger the models get, the worse it hits your bottom line. And what ties directly to that is latency isn't great, right? These aren't very fast. The bigger the model, the slower they are. And if these aren't enough, just to get a final punch in the gut, no one feels that great about the emissions of these, right? Like data center usage is expected to 5x by 2030, and none of the climate estimates include our AI usage. So this really sucks. Interestingly enough, all these pain points can really be traced down to just a select few root causes. On the reliability piece, it really ties to using a single model, having one point of failure. For costs, latency, and emissions, it comes down to two causes. One is using models that are just bigger than needed, and two is maybe sending inputs into those models that are larger than necessary, even if using a smaller model. So we have many pain points and just a few identified root causes. And that sounds like an opportunity. To add a little more color to this, say you take a prompt like, summarize my email, or 1 + 1 = what? You don't need to send that to the 1.7 trillion parameter GPT-4 model. GPT 3.5 did it fine. Claude Haiku is here, works great, and God forbid you use GPT-5 for something like that. Save those for the Math Olympiad problems, right? Now that's where we come in. We can solve this. We're effectively the Cloudflare for LLMs. Or maybe I should say the Akamai for LLMs. Now, if you don't know what Akamai or Cloudflare do, they're effectively middleware between website developers and users that gets the latency down, improves security, it gets the cost down. And that's exactly what we can do for LLMs. So Jack's going to walk through exactly how this works.
So we're able to do this with two key innovations, prompt optimization and model routing. Now, prompt optimization means we take an input prompt and get it down to the minimum tokens necessary while still conveying all of the information in the original prompt. This cuts down cost, latency, emissions, all the things we talked about. And then model routing makes sure that we send these prompts to the appropriate model. And that means the maximum powered model necessary to solve whatever we're using. And we use a classifier that we built to route it to the model that is the lowest cost, lowest latency, lowest related energy usage, but still gets the job done. And to make this really clear, this is how inference works today at big companies. Inference is when you use AI models. Companies hard code in one specific model and send all of their AI usage through that model. So in this example, GPT-4. And we act as middleware between companies and all of the models that are currently available. Within that middleware, we run our prompt optimization and our classifier that routes it to the appropriate model. And we could be really impactful on day one. This is a chart here that shows basically a company plugging in GPT-4, a frontier level model. And frankly, that's wasteful for most use cases. You don't need that much power for all of your AI queries. We think we can cut costs by 40% on day one and around 70% after we learn what efficacy means to a given company and once we really learn what their AI inference workloads are like. You might be wondering, okay, so how big is this market actually? And it's big now and it's growing fast. $4 billion was spent on LLM inference last year with third-party APIs. $8 billion will be spent this year, and we think there's a $5 billion market opportunity for middleware like Max Compute Co. Really, this AI wave that's happening right now is forcing companies to build AI into their products, and they're not worrying about optimization. So we want to be the company that comes in and handles their optimization so they can focus on building products. We've already built our MVP. We have a playground environment that we've been sharing with potential clients, a demo that's live, and you can start using our router with just 2 lines of code. A company we spoke to, Klarna here, we looked at how much money we could potentially save them. And it amounts to roughly $2 million a year, hundreds of thousands of hours of wait time by decreasing latency, and our product has more uptime than the OpenAI API itself. And we're absolutely the team to build this. I'm Jack O'Brien. I have a background in software engineering and I'm a 2-time exited founder, so I've built companies before. And I'm lucky to be joined by Tim.
I have over 8.5 years of ML AI experience, and I have an MIT degree in machine learning from 2017, 2018. So we know that this is going to be built. We're here to make sure that happens at MIT.
Thank you. Now for judges' questions.
It's a great pitch, guys. Maybe you could talk about the go-to-market. How do you plan to get people to deploy your 2 lines of code versus somebody else's?
Yeah, absolutely. So we started by talking to a bunch of startups, and I think they're interested in the value prop, but frankly, they don't have the workloads and traffic through, and they're not as worried about the reliability and big cost aspects. So that's led us to talking to some bigger companies, and what we're really trying to do is lock down an enterprise that wants to use this product as a development partner in the next couple months. Our ideal company is a large enterprise that doesn't have tech at its core and is willing to work with us to optimize their inference. And these are companies that are, there's plenty of companies where their CEO is mandating build Gen AI products right now, and companies are building fast, they plug in the most powerful model available, and we want to be who they turn to optimize their inference.
Thank you.
2 sort of related questions. I'm trying to think what they were. The first is, you talked about being like the Akamai of this space. In the Akamai situation, like getting to the edge, I mean, they had to build stuff and put it at the edge, right? In this case, you're talking about software that you're writing. So assuming you're successful, and I have every reason to believe you will be, what's to keep others from doing the same thing? And then when that happens, what happens to the cost? What's the model for how much you're going to charge your customers?
Yeah, so like 2 questions there. On the first piece, how to keep competitors at bay, there is a fixed cost associated with this to gather the data needed to build a classifier that can handle any of the open source and closed source models out there. And we've looked at the competitors. We know we're differentiated. They're heading in a completely different direction. They're mostly looking at interpretability, while we're kind of focusing on reliability and cost. And we've read their research papers, and we know that our approach is going to work better. So that was the first piece. Can you repeat the second question?
Just what is the model for how you're charging customers, and then what happens that over time as competition comes in?
Yeah, there's kind of 2 pieces there. In the beginning, we created more value or helped them slice out a piece of the pie. We take a fraction of that. Longer term, the plan is to build more of like an LLM management platform where we'd be charging costs to basically just license costs per seat to use that platform. improves the security of seeing the prompts that you're using and are being sent through your products. And there's a lot of other value-add services we could add on top of that. That's just beyond the delta and cost savings we're already bringing.
Yeah. And a bit more on the moat kind of in the long term. We think it's really important to be one of the first companies that builds this because you'll have the data on how to route across models. Companies are starting to route internally. OpenAI has built a system like this to route between GPT-4 and GPT-3.5, but they will never route to Anthropic. So we think it's going to be really valuable to be one of the first companies in. And our classifier only gets better over time as we have more data.
Is your focus more on the front-end entry point or on the API tie-in?
The front-end entry point, do you mean, we're not building any front-end components that companies will use
So you're not having any sort of
directly.
front-end components for users to direct use?
No, that's right. So this would be built into the back end of companies who are calling third-party LLM APIs. And the 2 lines of code that you drop in now essentially say, instead of routing this to OpenAI, route it to Max Compute Co. and then also pass us your API key so we know who you are. But it fits with most of the calls that are out there today.
Can you guys each just say a bit more about yourselves?
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. So former mechanical engineer, came to MIT to decide between PhD and then ML. So I decided to do ML masters, went to McKinsey, started as a ML engineer for 3 years, and then switched over to the strategy side where I managed teams of data scientists, data engineers, and strategy associates.
I was a Division I lacrosse player in college. After college, went to work at Google for a number of years, then started a company in fintech, worked on that for 2 years. We were eventually acquired after a year and a half. Wanted to focus more on building at the intersection of AI and sustainability. That led me back to MIT, and we think we found a great idea here.
Excellent. Thank you both.
Thank you very much, Max Compute Co. Next up, we have Pathflow.
Clicker.
Hi, everyone. I'm Diana, the founder and CEO of Pathflow, and I'm also a postdoctoral researcher here at MIT in the Department of Materials Science and Engineering. Pathflow is here to answer a fundamental problem with diagnostics that is not well known, which is how do we choose what to diagnose? That decision has a profound impact on the speed and accuracy of the diagnosis, as well as the time and cost incurred by the hospital to make that decision. Instead of spending a lot of money and time to find a needle in a haystack, Pathflow will find the needle in 5 minutes. Anytime you get a surgery or a biopsy, your tissue is sent to the pathology laboratory. That is the brain in the hospital that provides the diagnosis to you and your doctor. And the laboratory faces a daunting task. Let me show you what that looks like. This is what the lab receives. Do you see any disease here? No, me neither, and that's because it's microscopic. The lab has to randomly use their visual judgment to select regions of this tissue to do histology analysis, which looks like this, where you can see the disease under the microscope. Pathflow will guide the lab directly to the disease so that they can analyze it. Nobody is working on this, which is a huge opportunity because 30 to 50% of the lab's current effort provides no useful information. The lab and the hospital foot the bill. The hospital is reimbursed a fixed cost regardless of how much work they did. The patient has to wait for the diagnosis and can't start their treatment. And it's a problem that's only getting worse with the increasing caseload. This is Pathflow's solution. With our imaging technology, we can rapidly, in less than 5 minutes, provide the guide to the tissue for diagnosing, and we bring standardization to a game of guessing at a low cost. And the secret sauce is on your tables. We have shrunk an advanced medical imaging technology onto a chip that's made out of silicon. This is why I came to MIT to do a postdoc, because I know how hospitals think. Impactful technology needs to be at a price point that all hospitals can pay for, not just the fancy ones. Imagine where else you can put this and unlock a lot of other markets across the diagnostic and therapeutic continuum, low resource settings, and remote monitoring. We have 3 patents, and the fundamental technology was ranked as one of the top 50 papers in physics by Nature Communications. It was featured on the MIT homepage. We've received several awards and participated in the NSF I-Core program. And this is the value it provides. The device pays for itself in 2.5 months, and in 2 years, a hospital can save nearly $1 million in pathology costs and reach their bottom line. And the time to do this is right now, because the medical laboratory is facing the largest workforce shortage in medicine and one of the largest in any profession. That's why every lab we talk to is wondering, when can they get this? And we have several heads of pathology departments ready to help us, because this will have a huge impact on patient care if it's not solved. This is our team. I've been working with most of these people for the past 8 years. Working with them has been one of the greatest joys of my life. We did a 100-patient clinical study together during COVID. There is nothing that can stop us. Dr. Hipshush is a pathologist of 35 years. Jimmy has developed medical imaging algorithms for Philips and a successful startup. Martin is one of less than 10 engineers in the world who knows this process end-to-end, tenacious and very meticulous attention to detail. Our advisors include our MIT professor, who has 3 successful spin-outs from his lab, and the top FDA consultant in pathology, among others. This is our plan to go to the market. We've thought about everything from our product definition to how we're going to manufacture it. We're going to license along the way to the non-medical sector, from which we've received a lot of interest for this powerful technology and will help us be profitable sooner. We've mapped out our regulatory and reimbursement strategy, including CPT coding, and we have a strong interest in partnering with the digital pathology world, which is extremely complementary to what we do. And I ask you, diagnosis is our #1 problem, and why would you invest in a medical device when there are so many faster ways to make money and an easier path to market? And let me ask you this, there's a lot of areas in life where you would accept less than perfection. Is your and your family's disease diagnosis one of them? Join us on the diagnostic revolution. Thank you.
Now for questions from the judges.
Nice job. Could you talk about funding to date and how the 100K would benefit you? Where would it get you?
The 100K would help us get through our next prototype so that we can have all the components that we've built on a single chip, and we can pass along to manufacturing to our first prototype medical device.
Has there been funding in the company to date?
So we've received an award from the Massachusetts Life Science Center, a $100,000 award to get us started.
What do you see as your biggest challenges?
For anything in medicine, adoption. You know, most of the funding will go towards bringing the device to the market.
Any approvals required here?
So we need to get a 510K approval for the device, but we have some predicates that can be used.
What is the timeline for FDA approval for a device like this?
Something like this is around 18 months.
And you're selling to hospitals that have their own pathology lab, or people that outsource their pathology work?
Both. So we can sell to hospitals that have their own pathology labs as well as the standalone labs, which there are many of. Because of the workforce shortage, most hospitals have to outsource.
But the benefit is to whoever's doing the pathology work.
To the lab, the hospital, then the patient.
Sure.
If everything goes right, what does that look like?
It would look like working with these people that I've already worked with for so long, for a very long time, and continuing to develop other exciting products based on this. So there's so many other places we can use it and that we're excited about. So if we're successful with our first product, we would love to launch other products.
Could you give an example of one of those?
So rapid biopsy evaluation is a huge issue. Only 15% of breast biopsies actually have cancer, and you have to wait like a week for that diagnosis. So once we have a lot of data, in this gross pathology space, then you can have confidence in making, diagnostics or sort of early evaluation. Also, intraoperative assessment is another interesting field, remote diagnostics. This technology is used in ophthalmology, so you could do remote monitoring, low resource settings.
Yeah, and to maybe add on to that, what Diana mentioned was like for non-medical applications, there is also already interest in the imaging technology that we use. So you can think of like industrial process sensing, where people want to verify that whatever they're doing in the process is working well without touching what they're working with, right? So our imaging technology could be adapted to that. We can either license or work with partners in this process.
Just to make sure we're all understanding the same thing, you sell a piece of equipment, it's how big, it costs how much, the margins are what?
So we are selling a piece of equipment, AI subscription, likely a disposable that would be like a cover, like a sanitary cover. The cost of the device we're aiming for is $100,000. That is what our market analysis of talking to pathology laboratories shows. They would be willing to pay for it. And what were the other elements?
Margins, gross margins.
So for a capital equipment like this, we would be selling at approximately double the cost we spent to make it.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Pathflow. Now we have vertical horizons.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Cynthia from Vertical Horizons, and I'm here to tell you about our award-winning semiconductor technology. Today, data centers are incredibly energy and carbon intensive. They consume 2% of global energy and generate 2.5% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Cooling is also a major challenge for data centers, so they use an immense amount of water and energy just to keep the servers cool. As such, up to 90% of operating expenditures for a data center is energy. The rise of AI and cloud computing is making this problem bigger and hotter. AI is leading data centers to adopt high-powered GPU chips, which uses orders of magnitude more energy and generates 5 times more heat than CPU. Elon Musk was quoted earlier this year as saying that the world is going to face supply crunches in electricity and transformers by next year. What if we could accelerate the adoption of data infrastructure to support AI and high-powered computing while driving down energy, cost, and emissions? We've identified that reducing losses in the power conversion process for a data center is just such an opportunity. Currently, data centers use silicon-based converters, which are inefficient. The Palacios group at MIT has developed and patented a vertical transistor technology based on gallium nitride, which offers unparalleled advantages for high-power electronics. Compared to silicon and other semiconductor materials, it offers improved efficiency, higher reliability, operates at higher breakdown voltage, and has better thermal management properties, all on a smaller, more compact device area. In a data center, there are 3 or more power conversion points, from the utility down to the server rack itself. Deploying our technology across a data center power supply means a 35% gain in energy efficiency for power serving each rack. And that's not all. I mentioned the better thermal management properties for our technology. That means that there's less energy loss as heat, which means that there is reduced energy used on cooling the heat that's generated. So there's all these compounding benefits. Adding all of that together, what that means is that we can help every data center reduce operating expenditures by 25%. And that's not all. We also help to cut carbon emissions by 25%. And that's significant. For each 100 megawatt data center, that's equivalent to the energy use of 80,000 US households. Now, what's special about what we're doing is not just the technology, but also how it is made. Our approach, we've been awarded an ARPA-E Tech-to-Market grant that helps us to demonstrate a breakthrough approach of growing gallium on an engineered substrate. This means that the process is CMOS compatible, so we can leverage existing silicon fabrication capacity, so there's no high upfront investment in CapEx. Secondly, it helps us reduce the material cost down to 1/3. We're also the first in the world to be producing vertical GaN transistors on 8-inch wafers. And here is a picture of our prototype made at MIT Lincoln Lab. First of its kind in the world on an 8-inch wafer. And this 8-inch wafer is really significant in the semiconductor industry because of the economies of scale and its capacity for commercial production. The market opportunity of what we're talking about today is immense. First target market, data center converter modules, $700 million and growing. Our second target market, which we've already validated the pain point, is EV charging, $4 billion and growing at over 25% a year. Now, what's really exciting about what we're doing is that it's a platform play that can be applied across all high power electronics. So that means EV, microgrid, medical devices. Our total addressable market is over $30 billion. Our gallium nitride technology is outperforming both the incumbent silicon-based devices as well as the emerging silicon carbide technology. So when it comes to performance, fabrication ease, as well as cost, gallium nitride technology is outcompeting the rest. We've been working with industry partners, including Analog Devices, Chromis, UCSB, and Lincoln Lab, under this ARPA-E program to demonstrate the wafer fabrication process and also to produce the initial prototypes. At the same time, we've been working with all of these potential customers on the right to really validate the key pain point. And that's also how we secured our very first pilot. So we've signed an LOI with a pilot customer, a co-location data center in New York City, which is an incredible opportunity for us to pilot our transistor technology in a commercial setting. We're also well positioned to leverage the funding available under the IRA, as well as the US CHIPS and Science Act, which is about to announce billions of dollars of funding specifically for startups later this year. Now, we have a very ambitious but achievable go-to-market strategy. We've been focused on prototyping and really validating our customer discovery this first half of this year. Second half of this year, we'll be participating in Delta V and also executing on our pilot project. Next year, we hope to use the data from the pilot project to secure our first commercial customer, and then in 2026, we're going to new markets. That's why this 100K is going to make such a big difference for us. We're going to use the vast amount of money to actually carry out that pilot, and possibly another one, in order to generate the data to convince our first commercial customer to sign on. And we have the right team to take this forward. I'm a Sloan Fellow MBA student. I have over 10 years of experience across climate energy investing, market development, commercialization, and most recently as a climate diplomat to China. Josh, who will join us in a second, Sharon and Minsik are all PhD students in the Tomas Palacios group, where their research has been fundamental to the breakthroughs that we're talking about today. We're very closely advised by Dr. Tomas Palacios, and then also our roster of amazing commercialization industry investment advisors. Thank you so much, and please join us for a cleaner, more efficient future of high-power electronics.
Now for questions from the judges.
I'll start with a question. On your market slide, well, first, you described a lot of the challenges with data centers and how they're growing, and you talked about some significant efficiency and then cost gains. But I was surprised on your market slide, I think you said that was a $700 million market, and is that just because it's the converter modules, which are relatively, but if you're bringing that much value, is there more value that could be extracted there?
So yes, that's right. So actually, I have an appendix slide on this. So what we're doing is we're trying to demonstrate the value to our end customer. We're not necessarily going to be selling to that end customer. We might be integrating with somebody in the middle of the value chain. So that could be a UPS provider or a converter module supplier. But what we want to do is demonstrate the benefit and then understand how much value we can capture in the middle portion of that value chain. That's the purpose of our pilot.
Seems like you could extract more value, maybe.
Best case scenario, what does a custom deployment look like at a large data center? How long would that take?
You mean in the pilot, or?
Yeah, no, the actual production, past the pilot. If a pilot is successful.
That's a good question. So I think in a deployment, it kind of depends on whether it's a retrofit or because there's an opportunity to actually do retrofitting, or whether it's a whole new data center. So we talked, for example, with AWS, who is a hyperscaler, and so they're actually able to go ahead and spec our technology in their product or development roadmap spec sheets. And so in that case, we would be able to say to them, like, these are the opportunities for we can deploy our transistors, and we would plan ahead for that, and then be able to provide the transistors, and they will work with their power solutions provider to actually integrate the technology. If it's a retrofit, it would actually be a bit more piecemeal because we need to work with specific, like for example, a UPS provider or a power distribution provider in order to adapt our technology into their system.
Do you have an idea of the cost for conversion into your new transistors?
Cost per conversion?
Cost for conversion, to convert into your new transistors for the data centers.
Oh, not at this stage, unfortunately. Sorry about that.
It's great. You've stumped us. I think it's one product, the same product in a data center than in an EV?
No, we expect it to be different.
Yeah, so, I mean, they all operate at different power scales. So really what you're looking for is the current that it can supply and the voltage that it'll all break down at. The nice thing about these vertical devices is to change that voltage, you just grow a thicker wafer. So nothing that we do after the growth, which we just purchase, needs to be changed. So even in the same fabrication run, we can have all different voltages and different things come out from one wafer run, which is, pretty expensive and nice to be able to group together.
What aspect, executional aspect of this business keeps you up at night? Like, what's the thing that most scares you?
I guess as the engineer, I got to make all of these devices work, so I'm always thinking about what in the process flow can fail. And we've done quite a bit of de-risking now, so you saw that we had our first prototypes coming out, which I think has stopped me staying up at night for most of these. The rest of it's just, we've not been able to do long-term reliability testing, so that's always a question mark. I think we're pretty robust in that, we've got 40, 50 years of the silicon industry. We're using the same tools, the same materials beyond, the base semiconductor, where it should be pretty comparable. So I'm not very concerned about that, but that's probably the biggest question mark remaining.
Yeah, I'll ask.
Oh, maybe this is a similar question, but like you showed the fab using the the same silicon technology, but like how proven is gallium nitride technology? And maybe you answered it with the reliability question that it's not necessarily proven yet.
So just in the last couple of years, you're now able to start buying gallium nitride-based products. So you might have like a laptop charger that says powered by GaN on it or something like that. Those are obviously, it's not critical to anything that those continue working. So it's not, we're emerging into this new market, but there's very clearly a space that it needs to fill, and it's the best contender to fill that. So yeah, I think.
What is the durability of these wafers over like high load, like conversion? Like how long do they last?
I guess that entirely depends on how you design the circuit and how hard you're pushing these. So if you design it to break at 1,000 volts and they're always pushing it to 900 volts, they're going to break much sooner. We can fit in a space where silicon currently can't compete. So in theory, we could put in a safety factor of 3 on those, and then it should last longer. But it's hard to spec. The hotter you run it, the sooner it fails. All of these different things.
Thank you, Vertical Horizons.
Concludes the pitch portion of this evening's MIT 100K competition. So now we're going to be turning to the deliberation stage, and I wanted to just personally congratulate all of the 100K finalists. We know the creativity, discipline, and hard work required to make it at this stage, and all of you have shown the best of what it means to be a part of the MIT entrepreneurial ecosystem. The judges are now moving to a private room to record their scores and deliberate and choose this year's winner. We'll see them in just a bit. So now we're going to move to the audience choice voting procedure. In order to vote, you will need to use the unique voting code. So everyone should have received one when they checked into the event. You'll scan the QR code to access the voting form when you enter your code. And these codes are just to ensure that we're not sending them to our friends and family that aren't actually here today. Voting will open now. And we'll announce the winner at 9 p.m. So if everyone can be back in about 15 minutes, that will be great.
Thank you very much, everyone. See you at 9.
All right, thank you all for sticking around. Thank you so much for the judges for deciding our winners. We're gonna be announcing a couple of prizes tonight. We have the first place with our 100,000. The second place goes to the David T. Morgenthaler Founders Prize with 10,000. And then we have third place and Audience Choice Awards of 5,000 each.
So now we will announce our winners. We'll start with our Audience Choice Award, who will be taking home $5,000. I'm waiting for, there we go, PathFlow.
You guys can come up on stage.
Those checks are not the real thing. You have to shake their hands. Congrats, congrats.
Good job, guys. Good job.
Congratulations. The third place team who will be receiving another $5,000 are Adalat AI. You coming up? Oh, there he is. It's coming, I promise. Thank you very much. Now for a second place prize in honor of David Morgenthaler. And I wanted to speak a few words about David Morgenthaler because we've been mentioning his name when we've been talking about this prize, but it's worth talking about who that is. And he's a pioneer and icon of the American venture capital industry. David received his degrees from MIT in 1941 and was CEO of Fosesco, a foundry services company. He built a multi-generational enterprise of 57 corporations across the globe. In 1968, he founded Morgenthaler Ventures, a pioneering venture capital firm among the first ever. For his leadership during this period, David Morgenthaler was awarded the first Lifetime Achievement Award of the NVCA. During his career, Morgenthaler served as director, president, or chairman of more than 30 companies ranging from startups to multi-billion-dollar enterprises across different industries. David has dedicated his life and career to innovation and entrepreneurship. He believes in the transformative power of entrepreneurial leaders to build an ever-improving, more prosperous, healthier world for humanity. And he deeply believes in the potential of MIT graduates, the people in this room, to become not just inventors, but entrepreneurial leaders for society. And so it was to this end that David provided the funding for the MIT 100K competition, and it is to this end that the second prize is named after him. Our second prize, the David T. Morgenthaler Founders Winners Prize, will take home $10,000 and goes to Crimson Scientific.
Thank you.
And now for the largest prize of the night so far, which is named for Robert P. Goldberg. Robert graduated from MIT in 1965 and received his PhD from Harvard in 1973. Robert and his wife Judy got married in 1969. Robert loved MIT, and entrepreneurship was in his DNA. After founding and taking BGS Systems public, Robert returned to MIT as a visiting scholar at the Sloan School. Here, he developed a course in entrepreneurship and mentored MIT students for what was then the MIT 10K competition. Robert was exceedingly generous in the community, and that generosity has been mirrored by his family. His children and wife, Judy, felt that funding the 100K competition was an appropriate and worthwhile memorial to his entrepreneurial spirit. We're proud to honor his memory with this award. Without further ado, the Robert P. Goldberg Grand Prize winner, who will receive $100,000, is Helix Carbon.
So now we have actually a surprise this evening. And I'm going to let one of our sponsors from Yope talk about it.
Hi, everybody. I'm Chris from the Yope Foundation, and I first would like to, I'll be brief, but I'd like to thank the MIT 100K organization team for your partnership, but also for all of the hard work that I know goes into making these competitions happen. So thank you. A little bit about the Yope Foundation. So we're a private foundation, and we work closely with and support next generation innovators, creating solutions to advance the well-being of people and the planet. The way that we do that is we sponsor competitions, we sponsor awards, but we also invite folks who are recipients of our awards to work closely with our team of successful founders over the course of a year. We also run an early stage fund that all of the finalists are certainly welcome and encouraged to talk to me about at some point when you're ready, if you're raising money. But the real reason I'm here tonight is because it's my honor and privilege to announce that we are awarding tonight the Yope, what we call the Yope Alternate Future Award, to another team. This award is also 100K, so we're very pleased to be able to increase the total money out there to startups. So without further ado, I'd like to announce the winner of the Yope Alternate Future Award, Max Compute Co.
Guys, jump in a photo together. Get in there. So it's me? Right, guys. Thank you very much. You've been an amazing audience tonight. I've loved the participation. Thank you very much to our judges. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here at the MIT 100K. Thank you very much. Good night.